We are going to wrap up a series that we've been in this month throughout September. I don't know how we're at the end of September, but whatever. We've been going through this series that we've called Promises. And Pastors John has taught the last 2 weeks. They are in Ireland today, our senior pastors, John and Helen. They're over there and ministering, I think, in a few churches, which is awesome. They'll be back tomorrow. They have to get back because it's men's conference this week, so we need him back in the house. But it's been a series where we've been focusing on the promises of God. And I'm going to wrap it up today, and I'm excited to talk about this. Promises. I know that even saying that word causes a reaction in us. We have all experienced empty promises, broken commitments, things that cause us to be distrustful of anybody who would promise something to us. And when we talk about the promises of God, I know, because I'm a human as well, and we've talked to enough humans, that sometimes and often we have difficulty trusting what God promises because humans have failed us before. And we're surrounded by broken promises. You have been sucked into a commercial or an ad before. Perhaps you saw that there was a new lipstick out, and it was supposed to not run, not bleed, and so you believed it. You were suckered into believing that ad. You bought the lipstick, you put it on, you went out and ended up with lipstick on your teeth. It happens. Steve, don't you hate it when that happens? Worst, I know. Somebody sold you a car perhaps and told you it's awesome, it runs great, it has a few scratches, but just look past that. This thing is awesome, it's going to be faithful, it'll run great for you for years to come. You believed it, you bought the car, you drove out of the parking lot, and it started making a weird noise, and it was all downhill from there. Yes? We all have had people tell us one thing and then something else happens. You've experienced failures in relationship because somebody said they would be there for you. You dated some punk kid who said, I love you, baby, I'm going to be with you, we're going to do this thing. And as soon as there was a challenge, that person was out of there. For some of you, I know there are deep heart pains, things that are hugely challenging for you because somebody has broken their word. Somebody has said one thing to you, done something else. Perhaps you had a parent who abandoned you, and that hurts. You believed they would do one thing, and they did a completely different thing. And it's difficult to put your faith in people and difficult to put your faith in God, if you're honest, because that person broke a commitment. For some of you, you maybe went to a church, and sadly, in church communities, this happens as well. There was somebody who was a leader, perhaps, and said that they believed a certain set of something and preached one thing, but you got a little bit too close, and you saw a little bit too much, and you began to distrust that what people say is the same as what people do. For many of us, that's challenging. And it causes us to not only doubt people, but to doubt God. And so we have to talk about this, what God's promises. We have to talk about it because we need to, first of all, recognize where we are distrustful of people and where we're distrustful of God in order for us to move forward. Because faith essentially is believing that God is who he says he is, and then making decisions with our life that line up with who we believe God is. And we may say we believe God and we believe in God and we love God, but if we don't live in a way that trusts and follows him, then we're not living the full life of faith that God has designed for you to live. We're just not. And there's no judgment here because I know we all go through different things. I get it. There's hurt, there's pain, there's unforgiveness, there's stuff that we all deal with. And you probably, if you have a big issue like that in your life, have a good reason to just be distrustful. You could go ahead and live your whole life having a hard time walking by faith. understandable. But if you're not able to move past that, and that is the work, if you're not able to trust and put your faith in God, then your life will stay small and stuck. It just will. You'll probably have relationships that you can figure out and they work out okay, but you will not live the flourishing, fulfilled life that God intended you to live. Sounds harsh, but it's true. And so if we get this, and if we take steps towards growing in our faith and steps towards God, it changes everything. And so last week, Pastor John he talked through the first two promises that we're going to focus on. And we have a key scripture here. It's Exodus 6 and 7. And if we can keep this up here for a bit, I'll talk through it for a few moments. So we're looking at this example when God spoke to Moses. His people, the Israelites, were in bondage. They were slaves, and they had been slaves for centuries. They were stuck, and they cried out to God. God heard their cry, and he chose Moses to communicate with his people. And he chose to save them, to free them. And if we look at this scripture, it's powerful because while God had a purpose and a plan for his people, the Israelites, today we know that we are his chosen people. We are his family. The promises of God, his commitments to us, are exactly the same, which is exciting and which will free us. So God is speaking to Moses and he says, say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. So last week we looked at this, and we saw that we have two promises that Pastor John focused on. First of all, we have the promise of salvation. God says, I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. He promises to save us. That's the first step, salvation. And that right there, we could stop right there. We could just celebrate all day because God chose to save us. He chose to save his people. He chose to save you. But not only that, he also promises to free them and to free you. It says, I will free you from being slaves to them. We are no longer slaves. Honestly, most people get stuck right here and have a hard time getting free because, as I said before, we all have stuff, issues. There are things in your life because you have an enemy who would love to stop you, who would love to lie to you, who would love to steal from you, who puts traps in your path that would keep you stuck and trapped, slaves. And thank God he promises to free us. And it's a promise that we can trust in. And yet, for so many of us, we could just stay right here. The issues that we deal with stop us from getting free. Although God has promised it to us, unless we choose to take hold of it and move in faith, we don't experience freedom. It's interesting to me that even now, as October is around the corner and the leaves are changing colors out there, we see that nature is preaching to us to let go of dead things. Let go of it. Move on. Nature knows that. There's a season. There's a time to hold on to it, and there's a time to let go of it. And for us, perhaps today is the day we choose that we're going to let go of the disappointments, of the addiction that plagues us. Let go of it so that we can live the life that God has intended us to live. Last week we talked about the promises of salvation and the promise of freedom. Those are powerful promises, and they are yours. And today we're going to move on, and there's two other promises that we can find in this scripture that are true for us today as well. The first one is the promise of purpose. God promises that you can live a life of purpose, a life where you're actually doing what you were created to do, because we know that we're all different. This room is full of unique individuals. God made you the way he made you because of why he made you. If we don't move past the slavery that keeps us stuck, we don't get to discover the purpose that God has for us. But here we see that God promises he will redeem his people. We're going to talk about what it is to live a redeemed life, a life of redemption, which is a life of purpose. And he says, I'll redeem you with outstretched arm and mighty acts of judgment. P.S., that's not for you, just so you know. The outstretched arm is for you. The mighty acts of judgment are against your enemy. God feels strongly about this. When he was speaking to the Israelites, we know because they were about to go through the plagues. They were about to take on Pharaoh. There was going to be some mighty acts of judgment. God also promises to move on your behalf. He is committed to doing whatever it takes in order for you to live a redeemed life. And that's obvious when we look at Jesus and what he did to buy you back, to redeem you. Then he says, I'll take you as my own people and I will be your God. He promises to make you part of a family, the family of God, his people, and he will be your God. We're going to talk about that today as well. God promises that you'll live a life of fulfillment. So the two promises I want to focus on today are a life of purpose and a life of fulfillment. To live a life of purpose is to live a redeemed life. God promises to redeem your life. When he made this promise to the Israelites, he not only wanted to save them, but he also wanted to redeem them. His intention was to redeem their past pain and suffering. And that is an amazing thing about God, because he takes those broken, painful, hurtful things that God didn't ever intend. It wasn't his, he didn't put that in your life, but he can use it, and he does. And he takes it and he uses it in order to redeem you. To live a redeemed life is to do the thing that you're supposed to be doing. If you live a life in slavery, you're essentially, your purpose, your design is being abused. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Slaves are not living out their full potential. That isn't God's plan for his children, for his people. But unless we understand what our design is, what our purpose looks like, it's hard to treat our lives and our future with the honor and respect that it deserves, that God thought it was worthy of. To redeem something is to buy it back. It's to pay the ransom for that thing. If you were to make an exchange, one thing for another, the value of this thing would determine what you were willing to pay for it, right? When God looked at you, he obviously saw great value because he was willing to pay everything, the highest price, his own child. God sent Jesus to the cross to suffer, to die for you, because he thought that you were worthy. Ridiculous, that's crazy. But it's true. The Bible tells us that. This is the Bible. Last week we heard that God cannot lie. He doesn't tell a lie. It's impossible for him to lie. This is the truth. This is what we base our life on. The Bible tells us that Jesus died because he thought you were that valuable. But we have to understand that so that we can live a life of purpose. I have an object lesson for you. Just give me a second because I'm going to do this really carefully. This is my son's guitar. He was playing it earlier. I don't know if you noticed. It was pretty good. I have to shut my eyes so tight so that I worship Jesus and not stare at my son the whole time. Listen, we're going to close the service with it. He'll do it again. It's amazing. He's taller than me, obviously, because I don't think your guitar is supposed to fit right here. This is Miller's most precious possession, physical possession in the world. He's had a few guitars in his life. This one is by far the most expensive and most precious. And we were talking about it last night because I did this last night. I feel super cool walking around with his guitar. He fell in love with this guitar when he was what, like 12 or 13? 8, he says. Before he was interested in girls, he was interested in this particular guitar. That's pretty awesome. And he said that he saw Chuck Berry playing it, and Chuck Berry is probably who made it famous, right? This is the ES-335. I hope you're all impressed that I know that. It's a Gibson, and Chuck Berry played it, and he played, what song? Help. I forget, help, quick. Johnny B. Good. He played Johnny B. Good on it. So Miller said that he saw that, and it was what made him first want to play guitar at all. He went through a drums phase that was considerably louder than the guitar phase, so praise God for the guitar. He said that he saw Chris Doucette play something on the One album that was similar to this, and he was like, I need that guitar. And so he was smitten. But he couldn't afford it because he's 18 years old now, and he definitely couldn't afford it at 8. So a few months ago, his grandparents helped him out with this one, and so he's working on paying a portion of that back. But this is important to Miller. Now, Miller has studied this thing for years, and he knows every nuance of this particular guitar. He first fell in love with the red version, so he would talk about it longingly as Big Red. Found the black, loved the black. This is Black Beauty, by the way. He understands this thing. He appreciates it. This guitar has great value for my son. In fact, he asked me if I was wearing jewelry when I put this on last night because he said there was a new scratch on the back, but I am not, and I didn't scratch it. It's important to him. And so Miller has studied it. He knows the history that has gone into it. He understands the design. It's the first, I know this, semi-acoustic guitar. That's important, makes it special, I guess. But he appreciates it. There's a lot of value here for him. So he cares for it properly. He spends lots of time studying how to make it sound good. I don't understand any of it. I knew how to put it on, but to be honest, I had to look at him to see which way the arm was supposed to go, because I don't know. Miller's a lefty, obviously. This doesn't work for me. I'm not a muso. This isn't my thing. I love that he has a passion for it. But if this was my instrument, I would probably neglect it to start with. I'd be overwhelmed by it. It scares me. I would probably leave it in a corner of our house to collect dust because I wouldn't know how to use it properly. Or I could use it for something that wasn't its original intention. I could hang it on a wall, perhaps. It looks cool. It's black. It's shiny. I could, I don't know, turn it into a little coffee table or something. I don't understand it, and I don't appreciate it. So if this was mine, I would probably either ignore or abuse its intended design. For Miller, it's precious. And he lives a life devoted to not only studying it, but mastering it, helping it make the sound it was crafted and intended to make. And it was crafted with great design and intention. For him, knowing it, understanding it, studying it, treating it well is a game changer. God is your designer. He's the one who promises you a life of purpose. He knows exactly what notes you're created to play. He knows exactly why he made you the way he made you. I don't understand this, and I don't understand you, but God does. And if we can get a better understanding of the purpose that God has for us, it changes how we make decisions and how we walk forward. And I'm going to take this off before I continue. It matters. Ephesians 2:10 tells us that we are God's handiwork. We were created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Workmanship here can be translated to a word that we get poem or poetry from. We are God's poem. We are God's poetry. We are God's song. He has a plan for you. And the best way for us to live a redeemed life or a life of purpose is for us to understand our divine design. For us to pay attention to the way God made us. Your design reveals your destiny. That sounds like big words, and how on earth do we discover our purpose? But it's actually really simple. Pay attention, for starters, to the things that you're passionate about. There are things that get you fired up that don't really matter to the person who's sitting next to you. When it comes to church, for example, there are those of you who will walk in this room and you can't wait to have a conversation, to connect with somebody, to pray with somebody. You're going to notice people and you want to interact and talk to them. There are others who will come to church and you get passionate about helping to design systems, perhaps, making a plan so that the lineup moves quickly through the information center or the lineup moves quickly through the coffee bar. You see problems and you want to figure them out and solve them. That's how your brain works. We're all made differently, and there are things that you're passionate about. Pay attention to them because they're probably there for a reason. God had a plan. Pay attention to the things that have been your unique experiences. There are things you've walked through that you've learned along the way, along the road, that you've experienced for a reason because they've caused you perhaps to grow in spirit. They've caused you to have to grow in character. There's things you've walked through that others have not, that if you pay attention to them, you can help. They will help propel you towards your purpose. And pay attention to your pain. God's plan is to redeem your whole life, all of it. And the things that have been painful for you and perhaps are still painful for you today, God can use. If you choose to let him. Those things that have been difficult in your life, the people who have messed with you perhaps, your own failures perhaps. Pay attention to your pain because God's intention would be that it wouldn't be wasted, that he would redeem it, that life of slavery would be turned around, changed, so that you can find wholeness and freedom and so that you can help somebody else find freedom. That's always God's plan. Pay attention to those things. The other promise that we get from God is a life of fulfillment. He promises that he'll make us part of his family and that you'll find true fulfillment. And this drives all of us as humans. We recognize that we all have needs on the inside that haven't yet been met. And depending on where you're at life, those might look different. But God has put deep and driving needs on the inside of us that motivate us to take a next step, that motivate us in our faith walk, and that motivate us sometimes just to get out of bed in the morning. Psychologists have actually identified our basic human needs, the things that motivate us forward. And there are 8 that I'll share with you. The first one, the most basic, is physical needs. Obviously, we all have a need for food, water, sleep, air, basic physical needs. Second, we have safety needs. So once our physical needs are met, we all are motivated to feel safe, to feel like we have shelter, security, the basic things like security, order, law. The third need is love. We know this. On the inside of all of us, we desire to be loved. We all want to be needed, to be known. We desire to be seen and loved. This is why social media is such a big deal, because we all get a hit, if you will, of that love feeling when somebody interacts positively with us on social media, likes a picture, whatever. The fourth one is esteem. We all have a basic need to feel esteem, to have self-esteem, to feel like we've achieved something, we've been recognized for something, the need to be valued. Once that need is met, we're motivated by cognitive needs. We want to feel like we're learning something, like we're solving problems. We have a need to gain information, and that motivates us forward. The sixth need is aesthetic needs. So we appreciate when something is aesthetically pleasing. We like it when when we first came into the new foyer, for instance, that there was light, that there was space, that there weren't any clashing colors, because there weren't any colors at all, but that will come. We appreciate it, though, because we all have a need for beauty. We appreciate it, and it drives us. The seventh need is self-actualization. It's a need for us to feel like we've realized our personal potential, like we're living our best life, like we're being the person that we're supposed to be. It's interesting how these advance, that once that need is met, we want more. There's always more. We have a greater desire. And the highest need, the eighth one, that is on the inside of each one of us is transcendence. And you have to love this, because transcendence is when we take our eyes off of ourselves finally and we help somebody else. It's that need to feel like we are investing in others. We're changing another life. It's our greatest need, and it's our ultimate motivator. It causes us to endure everything that life throws at us, that desire to help somebody else. And if you've ever experienced this, and I'm sure you have, you know it drives you. When you finally feel like you've made a positive impact, you've helped somebody else, and it had nothing to do with you, it had everything to do with somebody else, a great need on the inside of us is met. God put that on the inside of us for a reason. It drives us forward. And we are all vitally important because we all have a different way to meet somebody else's needs. God is genius. He created you specifically because there is a need for what you have to offer this world. Your family, your workplace, your church, your school, whatever it is. 1 Corinthians 12:4 in the Message says, God's various gifts are handed out everywhere, but they all originate in God's Spirit. God's various ministries are carried out everywhere, but they all originate in God's Spirit. God's various expressions of power are in action everywhere, but God himself is behind it all. Each person is given something to do that shows who God is. Everyone gets in on it. Everyone benefits. All kinds of things are handed out by the Spirit and to all kinds of people. The variety is wonderful. Your fulfillment is always going to be found in somebody else. You won't experience true fulfillment on your own, focusing on your own needs. You're always going to find it serving, helping somebody else. God designed us for that. And he promises that if we trust him, if we walk by faith, we will discover what true fulfillment looks like. But it's not going to be because you figured it out on your own. It's always going to be because you submit to him and you serve somebody else. We talk a lot around here, and especially recently, about what our hope is for you. The steps that we would hope everybody takes. That first of all, you would know God. That you'd know him. That you'd meet him, and that then you'd start a journey for the rest of your life of knowing God, understanding him better. We hope that you will find freedom. And this is a journey for all of us. But finding freedom is so important, because if you're making decisions out of your fear or your insecurity or the things that would cause you to feel small, you cannot fully discover your purpose and make a difference. You might hit and miss a little bit here and there, but until you're walking in freedom, it's impossible. We have Relate groups, and we talk about them all the time because we have to talk about them all the time because we want you to find your people so that you can find freedom. Relate groups are really just an excuse for people to get together, gathering in homes, coffee shops, sometimes on a sport court. And we're launching a new semester of Relate groups right now because we're hoping that everybody will find their people. We all need people who we can be real with. Take off the mask, be real, talk about what's really going on. Have people who will stand with you, pray with you, walk you through it. You can't find freedom on your own. We just can't. God designed us to do it in community. And actually, as we're launching these relate groups, I want to challenge you. First of all, go ahead and join one. Find a group. Become part of one. But also, it's not too late to start one. We have interest groups. So if there's a thing that you're passionate about or something that you just do anyhow, perhaps you're into, baking, knitting, basketball, calligraphy. You could be into watching Disney movies. It doesn't matter. Find your thing and then make it into a group. Find your people. Gather your people. The group is really just an excuse to get together. If you start a Disney movie group, by the way, leave some time to talk, because it would be weird to just get together and watch Moana and then leave. But you understand what I mean. We want you to find your people, and you could start a group. We have people who are going to be in the foyer after service today who would love to help you with that. But anyhow, we want you to find freedom. We want you to discover your purpose, because God designed you with a purpose. He made a plan to redeem you, to buy you back, to pay the ransom. He gave up everything so that you don't have to be a slave anymore. That's not what He designed you for. But we have to recognize the value that God puts in us and then walk by faith towards it. And we hope, our intention is that you'll make a difference, that you'll live a life of fulfillment, a life of true fulfillment, where you're actually serving, helping other people. Our dream team it doesn't exist to meet the needs of Relate Church so much as it exists to meet the dream team's needs. Dream team is anybody who serves. It's for you. My life changed when I decided to forget about what I felt insecure about and help somebody else, get outside of myself a little bit. And it continues to be a journey of walking that out. That's what church is here for. It's a family. It's a place where you can take your next step. Find a life of fulfillment. That's the life that God has called us to. He's so faithful. He has an amazing plan for your life. Maybe you can't see it today. Just take the next step. It doesn't have to be all the steps. Just take a step. Do something today. Make a commitment today to move forward. You can trust Him completely. He is faithful. He cannot lie. He's for you.